Oh,
There you go.
I've been disappointed the whole time.
Oh, you did change it.
I did? Okay. So I guess that's the magic of the.
Yeah. Well, I think we have all of our board members now. Yep. Yeah, we've got Davion and Tish aren't gonna make it. So maybe it won't be a tie. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. It's now 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. Looks like we have a lot on the agenda. Good time to get going. All right. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all rise with me and let's recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Second item on the agenda is the invocation. And if you'll bow your head with me, I'll give the invocation. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight and meet on behalf of the town. We'd like for you to watch over this meeting and bless us during this meeting. And we'd also like to ask you to give us your guidance and direction in the decisions we make tonight. For us in your name we pray. Amen. All right. Third item on the agenda is the approval of the May 22nd, 2023 Planning Board minutes. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review those.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and accept the minutes as stated.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, on to the regular agenda items. The first item is TA 23-05, LDO sections 3.4E.2A, 3.41, 3.42, 3.43, 5.12B5. There's a lot of them here. 6.44, A9, 921A1, 921B5E, and 923D, and 11 definitions. I think I covered them all for you.
Yes, I think you did. Make sure this is on. Hello? Okay. Thank you, sir, for repeating the LDO sections that are subject to this text amendment 23-05. The paraphrased name of this is townhome lot frontage, as I'll get into here in your presentation. This is tagged with the item number 2 on your agenda, which is a rezoning for a property. Through the review of that rezoning project, it came to realize that there was deficiency in the LDO regarding townhome lot frontage, and that the type of design and community that the developer wishes to build could not be built under the current standard, where every townhome lot, really every residential lot, must front on a public right-of-way or a public street. So that devised this request by the applicant to add an option in the LDO that townhome lots, and only townhome lots, or single-family attached as it's called in the zoning use charts, could take their lot frontage off of a private access easement in lieu of a public street. So this is a mix of the applicant's desired sections to be edited, plus through the review of the text amendment, staff identified a host of other areas where there would be a much needed benefit to add very small additions to it. And you saw that in the exhibit to your memo in the red text, small little add-ons to certain sections throughout the code. It turned out to be 10 citations, as you're read into the record there, of sections of the LDO that would need to be changed to fully allow this to occur throughout the LDO without unintentional omissions of citations, or something that would lead down the line at the time of site plan or subdivision to hiccup a development. So we think we've caught all the areas where this provision to allow private access easements for townhomes, lots to be created throughout the code. So on the screen here, I'm just going to show you basically portioned out exhibits from the attachment in your memo, that is the proposed addition. So obviously the amendments or changes are in red, either strike-throughs or new text. So to begin, in the residential principal uses for dwelling single-family attached, which commonly referred to as townhomes or townhouses, the addition of B and C with C1 below there. So basically, this is all laying out the groundwork for townhome lots could front on a private access easement as opposed to a brand-new public street or public right-of-way. Section 5.12 continues to be edited with language here, number 2. Again, just fleshing out all of the details and descriptions, basically ensuring that if a developer wishes to use this option, they will still have to provide all of the usual and necessary and beneficial infrastructure that comes with public streets, such as sidewalks, pedestrian accessibility, drainage systems, sewer and water utilities, and their necessary easements, street trees. So all of those things are written in here, hopefully to catch the way that a developer could build a subdivision for townhomes akin to how they would do it now under the LDO for townhomes with public streets. So to alleviate any inconsistencies where a developer might find a way to not have to build either street trees or sidewalks or things of that nature. So the language continues here into a number 3, considering if they are designed as alleys or vehicle use parking areas, in other words, parking lots. So if the means of access to a townhome building were actually via a parking lot, it lays out pavement widths, et cetera. So again, staff was trying to think of all the ways that the development of townhomes in lieu of public street frontage could be designed and built with some assurances that, again, all the necessary things like public accessibility, utility provisions, stormwater management were all dealt with. Let's see. So the next section to be revised is 9.2.1. Again, another reference where it says all subdivision lots shall abut at least 20 feet on a public street. Here's where it's been expanded to say except for the single-family attached use, a private access easement equaling that minimum of 20-foot width could be used. So again, just laying out that option very specifically for the townhome use only, though. Next section is 3.4E. Again, a reference to if private access easements, let me get my cursor down there, are to be used, then building placement shall be made from the edge of carway, et cetera. So again, just a catch-all to make sure that if that option to deviate from public right-of-ways is done, here's a regulation or a standard to follow. And then 4, 5, I think the next 3 or 4 are kind of repetitive. They're references within certain sections of the code for different zoning districts, the TC zoning district, the AC zoning district, et cetera, where just added private access easement language. So again, to make that provision, because these are the districts where townhomes are permitted. And townhomes are only permitted actually in 4 zoning districts, the RH residential high, and then all 3 types of the mixed-use districts. So yeah, number 6 is another, that's catching that language for the NC district. The 7th amendment is to parking design standards. Again, a very simple addition of the words private access easement to that language there. 8 and 9 are again adding just some language to capture, for the single-family attached use, private access easements, et cetera. So again, just references that were omitted for obvious reasons because this was all predicated on public streets for all new residential lots. And the last one is to add 2 definitions, one for private access easement, to create a definition so that everyone can look and read and understand that. And then just for clarification, one for public access easement also. There is one definition of just the word easement in the LDO currently. It's very general and generic. Usually public right-of-ways, you don't need access easements because the entire right-of-way is an access easement kind of inherently. But should there be a case where public access easement across private property would need to be created, this definition will cover that. So again, when staff was devising or writing private access easement, it just became kind of common sense to write one for public access easement also. So staff does recommend approval of TA 2305 to the planning board to recommend to the town board. Staff worked very closely over many, many weeks with the applicant to come up with this language and to understand the pros, the cons, the benefits, both to the development community, but also to the town. So staff does recommend approval for this, and our proposed motion, as seen here, is to recommend either approval or denial to the town board. The applicant is here, and they've got some graphics I think they might want to show, or at least respond to questions about this topic.
All right.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ellebarger. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Ellebarger, or would you like to hear the presentation from the applicant first?
I have a quick question. Can you go back one slide?
One slide.
Maybe it was 2 slides.
Two. Couple.
Blank wall is not permitted section, or the architectural standards. Define for me what blank wall. Would it be just complete wall? Would a pair of windows break up the? My concern is you have a whole bunch of townhomes next to each other. You got the back facing a public area, even if it's an easement, and you just see a blank wall with a couple windows in it, and it looks more like a old office building versus something that's well designed.
Sure. So first, blank wall is not being edited here or amended. Oh, okay. Blank wall does not pertain to townhomes. It's a standard. State law precludes the town from applying rules for townhomes, like design standards for townhomes. The NC district can be non-residential as well. So I believe this section is actually, well, the word blank wall would apply to non-residential development. That's my point here, not to townhomes. So if your concern is about townhomes having large blank walls, this wouldn't be affecting it, and I'm pretty sure the state law precludes the town from regulating that design.
Okay.
But this text amendment is not seeking to change that, but if that's a conversation you'd like to have offline sometime.
I wouldn't have thought about it from a townhome standpoint in most cases because of the way the facing, like the back faces another back, right? So that's a resident-to-resident problem. But if you have a right-of-way or street in that section, all of a sudden you could end up with a acreage of wall on one side that's
Right.
facing something that would be more public.
Currently, with the requirement that every townhome lot fronts on a public street, you could have a scenario where the backside of a townhome building, not the front door area, could be facing another, let's say an existing public street, because the developer builds a new public street that they lot front on, and thus the back. Usually the back has the decks and things of that nature. The blank side might actually be the end unit as a large, if you're thinking of a 3-story townhome building, that end unit could be more of a blank wall presence then. And really that could be, created under today's standard, under the public lot frontage.
Answer your question? All right. Any other question, Mr. Ellebarger?
Yeah, in your language, you mentioned that this provides flexibility in design. Can you expand on what you mean by flexibility in design?
Sure. The applicants currently would have to build a brand-new street to lot front the lots on. So if you think of a 6-unit townhome building, the entire building and its 6 lots would have to front on that public street. Public streets cost a lot of money and investment to put the infrastructure in, so the streets tend to be the fewer get designed. By changing this and allowing private access easements, the developer could turn a building 90 degrees, and rather than put that entire frontage on a public street, it could only put the end of the building against a public street. So that amount of street frontage for the end versus the lateral or length of the building, and then the developer could build a private access easement, like a parking lot or a small private street to access each unit.
So since this is developer-driven, can you go to the map and show me why this is a particular request coming from the developer?
I would let the developer answer as to why they're seeking to develop this way.
All right. Any other questions? Or if not, we can let the developer
Sure.
give his presentation.
Oh, sorry. Give me the-
Yeah. We sent a separate slideshow to him, so we're gonna crank that up.
If you would, please state your name.
Yeah,
For
my
the
name is
record.
Keith Robbins. I'm a planner for Strong Rock Engineering Group. My degrees are in planning and landscape architecture. So when we talked about this zoning change, we wanted to look at specifically what does a 20-foot frontage actually look like? And then from that, we then went backwards to come up with a better option for the town. So this slideshow, we've gone through with the Withers and Ravenel, our staff, and staff here in Rolesville to kind of explain this. So if it sounds a little confusing, it is for a lot of people. So this is really kind of the view of what your code will give you on a 20-foot frontage. This is a picture of a neighborhood in Raleigh, and it's exact interpretation of the code, 20-foot frontage on a public street. And you can see we have garbage cans, curb cuts, cars, telephone poles, and that's what it would look like. And talking to some folks, we noticed that the main issue is on garbage day, you play dodgeball between cars, garbage trucks, cans, and everything else. And so we wanted to come up with something that's a little better than this strict interpretation of a 20-foot right-of-way frontage. So to me, this is the worst-case scenario of taking the code exactly as is. So what we wanted to do is actually then look at this as a simple little sketch. And so here's our public right-of-way. And then every 20 feet, we would then have a 2-car curb cut and a townhouse in units of either 8 or 4 or 6. And so the idea is to create something that, a better looking street, a safer street, and a street that offers a greater residential capability for the town itself. And as a result, we looked at our site plan, which you've seen here, with different options. And so what it does is it creates a public street network and then a private access easement area. And then when we actually look at the historical precedents, there's actually...
Go back and show me which one is private and which one's public.
Okay, so the public is the yellow, and then the private are the light blues.
Okay.
And so we have a variety of different interpretations of the code looking at it that way. From an historical perspective, we use the term muse, which is actually a term that exists for the last 300 years in the United States. And basically, it's a small street with low-density houses. And actually, in this case, in New York City, they used to be stables, and now they're residential units. So when we actually look at what we're talking about as a private access easement, we'll go through this drawing and sketch to hopefully explain it. So the first thing we want to do is say we've got townhouses that have a front door and a rear door. And so the front door is for the pedestrians, which is over here, and the rear access would be for the cars here. So the property line sits here in the back and then in the front of the building. The access easement is actually the Raleigh sewer easement, which is 35 feet. So we have Raleigh water and sewer services coming off the main right-of-way into each unit. And all the zoning setbacks apply here for that, for Rolesville with the separation of the buildings. We've also talked to the fire department, and they said these units these small little streets, if they're one-way or dead end, can only be 150 feet from the right-of-way, which actually makes it a perfect fit for the Rolesville four-unit townhomes. The other option with the 4-unit, with the Rolesville parking requirements of 2.25, every 4 units needs a special guest space as well, and that stays off the main right-of-way, back here as an example. And then finally, the street is itself maintained and preserved, and we follow all the street code issues. So we have street trees, screening plants, room for fire hydrant, room for garbage pickup, room for streetlights, all meeting the exact implications of the code itself. And it also then gives us the opportunity to create special areas for tenants to roll out their garbage cans so they're not actually in front of everyone's driveway, so you're not going to run into them on garbage day itself. So it's taking the code and then kind of add to it to make a better street. And so when we look at it carefully on the front side, the way this really becomes quite a nice little attractive area is that the Raleigh front easement is actually also shared with the, or should I say, the front easement is actually shared with the City of Raleigh stormwater easement, which is 20 feet wide. So that ends up creating kind of a rain garden approach in the front, again with extra landscaping and trees and shrubs and flowers, kind of creating a nice little neighborhood garden courtyard, if you will. And again, the sidewalks are part of the street, and then we have sidewalks in the back leading to the one parking spot as well. And then on the quayside for the back is actually where this easement really kind of comes into play. So we have the 35-foot Raleigh sewer, combined sewer and water easements, which then gives water and sewer service to every building. We then have enough parking to meet the Rolesville code. We then have kind of the best thing is this created private little courtyard, which is perfect for everything from basketball games to playing stickball and everything else that's not in the public right-of-way. So all that's there as well. And yet the public right-of-way is still maintained as the code requires with street trees and all the rest. So what we're trying to do is take the code and make a better place for the town and for the residents. And again, we've talked to Raleigh Utilities, staff, we've talked to the fire department, went through a variety of the other agencies to review this to make sure that it met their standards and their codes. And that's it. So that's the idea for this plan.
So I see how the idea of a private easement works in this respect, in this design.
Yeah.
But I'm frankly concerned that the way things are worded and the way things are laid out, not in this project, but just in the ordinance, that you could have a 200, 300, 400 foot, you could have a mile-long private easement in a project with no limitations. And then what happens there when it comes to whether it's fire or police or any other types of access that we would need as a town to that area. I'm a little bit just concerned about the way I saw the changes that, this design, I can see how it's attractive and it makes sense, but I think the language opens up for an unlimited amount of private access, and that those streets, even though you're only limiting to what you show here, somebody else could come in with another plan and have the whole development could essentially be a private easement, and then we would need permission basically to get on that property. So if the police needed to do a stakeout of something, deep in the property, they would have to ask permission to do so. And I don't know if that's something that I feel really comfortable with in that respect.
I mean, that's a really good theoretical question, hypothetical, and you know that your staff gets to review all these plans before they actually come to you. So maybe the next time they look at a text change, they limit this to a certain number of feet so that worst case scenario doesn't occur. The other issue we do know is that because this is a City of Raleigh easement, Raleigh has access to it for Raleigh Utilities at any time they want. So it's not exactly private property. And I think that was one of the issues we had with how we named this thing, not calling it a private street, which would imply it's not town property, or no one has access to it. And by calling it an access easement, that's the way of helping kind of define this as something unique and different in that sense.
So who's responsible for the maintenance of all that asphalt and anything that falls in that easement? That would be the HOA, I'm
The
assuming.
HOA.
Right, so that you can have a public street that's nice and clean because we take care of it, but then you can have a dilapidated street with potholes and all sorts of mess because the HOA is not taking care of it. That's very possible, correct?
Anything is possible, but I think the issue is the HOA does have a responsibility to the town to maintain certain things as part of the HOA documents.
So would y'all have a reserve study projection? What I find with townhomes and lots of new development, the developers like to keep the maintenance costs very low. So when I look at rain gardens, that's a very expensive proposition to keep up. I also look at those, exactly what my co-counselor or commissioner here says, is that lots of these older communities don't have, or don't put enough reserves and do that perpetually because it's not required in North Carolina to maintain this private type easement. Would y'all be putting any kind of documentation in those HOAs requiring that up front, that they put those reserves for this?
No, absolutely. And I would say that the fire department and the police department, because this is an access easement, they do have the ability to say something about the condition of the street, especially the fire department, because they've reviewed this. And so if the fire department says that this street is not accessible to our vehicles, then that would be a burden that the individual owners and the HOA would have to deal with. So there are, because this is an easement with much more overlapping authority from different agencies besides Rolesville, they actually can come in and supersede the town in saying, the city of Raleigh says we need this way, or the fire department can do this, or Wake EMS can say this needs to be fixed and maintained at a certain level.
Will all the road, the private easement construction be done to the same standards as the public roads?
Absolutely. It has to be.
What would prevent these from just being public roads that stub to the adjacent property line?
Not much. The difference is we're adding another layer of the public street. So, in other words, we're keeping in other words, when we looked at what the 20-foot townhouse burden required for the public street, there's too many requirements for it to actually fit. In other words, if you look at each townhouse, we need two-car garage, parking lot, a curb cut right on the street, plus water access, sewer access, electric utility access, plus a sidewalk, plus street trees, plus a fire hydrant, plus street lights. When you add all those together, they don't fit.
But aren't these meeting all the public street standards?
This does, yes, by flipping the townhouse on a private access easement.
I guess I'm just not 100% seeing why the private access easement just couldn't be a public street and still.
It, for all due purposes, it looks and functions as a public street, but it's not. That's why we have the text change.
I mean, but if it were to be made a public street, the text change wouldn't be needed, correct?
With this design, it would not meet your public street requirements. That's why the text change is needed.
What additional upgrades to those private streets would need to be made to make it be a public street? I mean, because you're already running the utilities, you've got your parking. I mean, the only thing I'm seeing is the width of the right-of-way.
The issue is more of the technical requirements of everything that's in the public street requirement by the town. In other words, there's no way to fit all the items in there. So in other words, the fire hydrant here is actually in the public street. It's not on the alley itself, but the fire department says as long as they're 150 feet from it, they can serve the fire on there. As a result, that lets that easement free up for other space. In other words, when we take the entirety of the requirements for a public street, we're breaking it apart into little pieces so it all fits together in a different way. But all the pieces are still there. So visually, it looks like a street. physically it functions like a street. It's got all the pieces that a street has, but we're calling it something different and giving it a different definition, and that's why the text change is needed, to make all that work.
Yeah,
Is it-
I'm
if-
still, I don't know if there's smoke and mirrors going on, but I just really don't understand, to his point, what is the difference? I mean, there has to be something that says, what is the difference? I mean, when you say things can't fit, if things can't fit, then how do we have townhomes in Rolesville already? I understand the drawings and I understand what's going on, but it's like, what part of the code, is it because it's a 4-unit building? Is it because the 20 feet should be 30 feet in order to fit everything? I mean, what is it that's not making it work? Or is it simply the design that you're trying to pull off that doesn't allow it to fit?
You'd have something that looks like this.
So those are duplexes.
Those are duplexes, but your code allows up to 8 buildings. So if you look at that street and look at the perspective of it,
We wouldn't
that's...
have mailboxes today.
Okay,
I won't allow
So, I mean, back to your,
but still fine, what you're saying then is if I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, it's probably about a dozen, if not more, along this street.
yeah,
You're saying that if I visualize this and stop at that one light post because that's the 8th house or the 8th structure, that's what you're saying our code allows, is up to 8 of those duplexes put together.
it does.
So if you made that same street a private easement, what
4
would
of
be
those
different?
duplexes.
That street's a
4
public, right? Public
It's
street? But if
public
that was a
street,
private
yeah.
easement, it could be exactly the same, there'd be no difference.
Well, what we're proposing is limiting that to certain depths and lengths, so all the pieces are still there, because you'll still have the public street and the street trees, the fire, the light, and all that there. You'll now have room for garbage collection, you'll have room for all your utility collection as well.
Do the same thing there.
If you want, yeah,
Like that public street, I could take all that stuff, put a collection at the very front of the street. You go pick it up, it's just no difference between, like, everybody's struggling, I think, is what's the actual difference of the easement versus a public street? If it's short stub, like it's 4 houses or 4 units or 8 units, do you require to go, you have to go put a fire, I was saying fire plug.
hydrant.
Thank you, fire hydrant, showing my age. The fire hydrant, blah, 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 because if it's a private street that's 50 feet long, do you have to do that? I still can't grasp. I understand the design here, and I like it, but it's not your design we have to judge on. I'm judging based on what's in the text amendment.
Right.
And so if you're doing all these great things and somebody else who doesn't really care about doing great things just wants to get snaky with it, how do I protect it from the next guy?
Right.
yeah.
Jason Pfister, I'm Vice President of Development for Ellis. I think to answer that question, I think it's important to remember this is still the only scenario where this option is allowed is still a conditional zoning. So through the use of conditions, you can kind of protect from those concerns. But I think what this allows, by using the private access easement, allows us to move some of the infrastructure and to kind of use the space more efficiently. You still have all the infrastructure you need, but it allows us to put sewer and water in the back and gives a little bit more flexibility. It's really about walkability, the design function. You know, we're sort of, yes, we're talking about this text amendment generally, but when you look at the specifics of the design and kind of the really what brought about the need for the text amendment was the design of the specific project.
So, yeah, back to because this is a conditional zoning, there's all sorts of criteria needed in order to meet that conditional zoning requirement. So there's numerous ways that you as a board can look at it and say, and staff can look at it and review it before it gets to you and says, it has to be a conditional use zoning district. It can only really be for the NC district for the most part. or the TC, and then it goes from there. So there are numerous ways within your system of actually protecting yourselves from the worst-case scenario, or from streets that don't work, or these things from getting out of hand.
Can you back up a couple slides to where you showed the two colors of what was public versus what was private, please?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you've got a little bit different from your drawing, because now you've got going to the north of the left to right public street, you've got that entire section as being private easement. So now,
The two D sections and the E section are really long.
yeah, so I get what you were saying before about where the E sections are. That I think is reasonable to absorb with the way you're speaking, the advantage and the reason why this is here. But that D and E gets me really worried. You know, the inside of that gets me really worried. And then just even going out to the B area, I just think, I just worry that it makes it too easy for streets to just become less managed by the town and less accessible by the town for a number of different reasons, two of which I've already mentioned. So that one's a little bit long. I mean, now we're looking like it's, you know, backloaded townhomes or front-loaded townhomes on a private easement. That's what D is, right? Front-loaded townhomes on a private easement, right?
Yeah.
So how does that look different than the picture that you showed me earlier, or the public street in Raleigh, other than duplexes versus 4 to a building? Isn't that going to have the same inherent visual problem?
The idea on this one is that it's a courtyard, so we're able to only put it on one side. And so that was part of the design here, is that we have this public space in the middle as a green space.
So where is that on D then? So
This here is all is the D part are these houses that face, and this little courtyard here in the middle.
Is the guy at the very top right-hand corner on D got to roll his trash can all the way to the curb in your scenario about
The
having
public
that
street?
to the public street to get it picked up?
We could, no, he would probably roll it
How
to a
would the
certain
dumpster
area
of the
here.
people turn around down there if it's only 20 foot wide? How is that trash truck going to get in there to do that?
No, these have to be 30 feet wide, so they'll be as wide as a public street.
Well, how's he going to turn around in those?
Because they can come in, do this, and turn around in Loop Road.
E.
E,
For E,
in the
they can come around, turn around, and then leave this way. So that cul-de-sac bubble, which gives also access to the storm pond, makes all that work.
So we got private roads that are going to get a lot of traffic.
Five-
That thing having to go and back in and come out with that.
and 5 private stubs. Those are stubs, I'm assuming, right? B and E to the east and west? Are those stub outs?
Those are the example that we showed you before, the 4 units.
Talking about B's over here on the left.
B,
They don't connect.
Yeah.
But they're not connecting to the adjacent properties, though, correct?
B.
No,
B-
that's a, go ahead, sorry.
B do connect to the adjacent property, so
Right.
they're also part of a private driveway for these people, these
Right.
2 homes.
Because they currently use that one road, I forget the name of it.
Yeah, that's
Begins with an
actually a
M.
private street, too.
Rock
Yeah,
Farm-
yeah, it's a
Farm-
private street, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So half of it would become, basically all of it would become public until it stretches back farther up, then it
Yeah,
becomes
Rock
private.
Farm Road will go away in its entirety, and then
Yeah.
there's 2 private residences that are pretty much where those 2 Bs are.
Right.
On the diagram, that will be reconfigured to allow, they'll have their own private access easement.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind the board and the applicant that we're discussing the text amendment only.
Oh,
And while these graphics are examples, we're not, the next case, the rezoning, this
I
is part of
understand
their
that, but
materials.
relative to public versus private access easement, it's important to understand, you know, and visualize what is possible and what gets.
That's correct.
So, yeah.
Keith, if you could keep to just examples and not your layout per se, that will be discussed.
Yeah, yeah.
While you're there, Michael, I've got one question that may be more to the ordinance in a whole. Yeah, I didn't notice in here right offhand, is there a maximum length of these private easements that could be?
Yes, there is.
As,
On, if we go back to this here,
I mean, in the UDO text amendment, is there something in there that limits it? And if not, what would prevent somebody from proposing an entire subdivision to be
2 mile easement.
a gated community with private,
Sure.
all the lots or
I would
townhome
say
lots?
concerns like fire access or the accessibility from those who have right to the easement, City of Raleigh or White County for stormwater, et cetera. I would say trash, sorry, if solid waste is going back there as well, they would have to be able to get in and out. So all of those other entities would have say as to what the ultimate length is. I would say if it were a public street or a private access easement, the length is determined by block length, which is a subdivision standard. So it would be looked at the same way as that.
But
These
if
four
we're-
stub outs are 120 feet, right? Max? So
They're not
They're-
designed per se for length, so.
for four
they have to be
townhomes.
less than 120.
Right.
Actually,
Once you
those,
reach 150 feet, you have to have a fire truck turnaround, so
Mm-hmm.
that's the practical limit is 150. The depth is 150.
But the proposed text amendment does not include a distance restriction. As I read it, it just,
Correct, I don't believe it has
Correct.
one in there. Correct.
right, which is what my basic concern is. It
I
could,
thought somewhere I saw 120 feet on these 5 or 7 stub outs.
yeah, for this one, we talked to the fire department, and their maximum without a stub out, without any type of,
It'd be 150.
is 150 from the center line of the street, which technically makes that 120,
Right.
since it's a 30-foot. So that's the maximum distance these can be, and these are actually less than that.
That's for the stubs, but on the other streets, the D and E's that were out there, they just go straight through for, there was like
That's-
5 of those or.
You're going to be hydrogen on
600.
D and E all the way around from
Right,
Yeah, off the yellow.
main road to main,
yeah.
all that private easement will be hydrogen in front of,
So
That
what's
is
the
fire
difference
hydrants
for
in front of
Yep.
that, yeah.
For these, I completely understand.
right,
I don't, for the really long ones, I don't.
Right.
And that's the thing is what's the difference if you went back to the other map and you had the really long street was D? To me, there would be no difference from a public street to an easement. Because you gotta do hydrants, you gotta bring power, you gotta bring sewer. Right, so all the pieces that you have in there, these I get, like, these actually make a lot of sense to actually fix things, makes a nice little area. The long streets to me don't make any sense.
Guess we're in a position that we could recommend a maximum length at this
150
point.
is basically what it is, right? Because you max it out and saying at that point you have to have a fire turnaround anyways. If you, for whatever reason, extended it, you'd almost have to say 150 cul-de-sac and then another 150 feet, which would be kind of silly. But go down my road and you'll see exactly what that looks like.
I think my concern would be, now that we're opening it up without a maximum distance, someone coming in with an entire neighborhood, and proposing a gated community with all private alleys for access or private access easements. I don't see where this new text amendment would prevent that.
You don't even need to be gated, right? At that point, if it's basically all private property, I drive onto that property, then I'm trespassing.
Right.
Now, it's a misdemeanor because you didn't tell me, right? But if you tell me to get out, now it's a felony. And by the looks of those streets, you couldn't, like me just driving down the road, taking a cruise, wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a private easement street
right.
or a public one.
That's
This one
another,
makes a
that's
lot-
another
I mean,
point that
these
I didn't
little
get to
stubs-
yet.
These little stubs make a ton of sense. They make a ton of sense. I just don't think the long ones make any sense.
It's important to understand that we're calling these an access easement and not a private access easement, and I think that
I can
definition.
call myself Bob and Jim, and I don't be a wise ass about it, but what we're calling it is nice, what you're calling it. What I'm seeing in the LDO is not going to be the same thing, because I can make it both. I can call it a private easement, or I can call it a whatever easement, and it's reality a private street without calling it a private street.
Right.
And I get it, right? And I, like, creative, because I like it. I just don't, those long streets to me are public access ways, and they need to be treated just like that.
And I can tell you from a design and construction standpoint, this private access easement is, just from the development community, that's a much more costly option for us. So to the extent we could do private streets and it made sense, that's certainly what we would do. So I think the market is probably going to temper some of those, it would not make economic sense to come in and do the development you were talking about with all private streets.
As when somebody who deals with contracts, I like to see things in black and white.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just telling you that
Somebody will go, we can do this because
Yep.
it meets some other thing or other pieces of it, but if it's on the, if
Like you
it's
said,
here,
anything is possible.
and you need to come into it to get an exception to that, then I'm much happier saying no to an exception than
Having to
no
think of
something
one
that's-
every single time a plan comes
Right,
in.
disallowing something that's already on a piece of
Right.
paper.
Yep. And again, if you went back to the drawing, I know it's for an example, but not necessarily speaking directly of your plan, that longer private access, what would you have to do in order to make that a public road?
If you just took D right there, throw away E for a second, just the
The
D.
D
that
on the
goes-
right, the D to the right of the yellow, or next to the yellow.
To me, there's almost no difference between if you created that as a public street, an easement, a private street. All reality is it's X amount of feet long, and you're declaring and saying, okay, because it's an easement, I don't have to do X. But the length of you do have to do that regardless. You have to put the hydrant in, you gotta put power in, you gotta put sewer in. The facing of those units, because at that point, I'm assuming it's gonna face into the blue, would be a public street, and you've met the requirement on both sides, right? So, again, I get the E parts, but the two D areas and the longer E one, to me, are at odds.
Well, the D is actually a contiguous street, and the B is a loop road, if you will. So, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, and we're looking at, could we actually build that as a public street as the code? And it'll look pretty much similar to it.
So again, I go
I'll not
back
do
to
it.
I am not debating your design. I am wanting to make sure that the protection in the LDO states that you can't do something like let's say I get a great big square and I just create a whole bunch of blocks and declare it private easement, and I can do anything I want with it at that point, right? That's not the desire, I think, of what we're trying to get done. So I want to make sure we're preventing that type of problem, not preventing you from doing what you want to build. And I don't think that does. If we put a limiter on the length, even if a limiter came, let's say you ran a private road, just for laughs, or a public road, sorry, through half of that. Right, so there's another road that comes from in between the two E's on the right, and you run it all the way across. I'm not saying you would want to do that. But, okay, now my street length, my private easement length is a lot shorter. It may be continuous length, but you've broken it up with a private road or a public access road.
Right.
That may be an answer that somebody would have to come up with, not you, if you make that a public road. So I'm comfortable with the smaller lengths, I'm just not comfortable with the longer ones.
I had one more question. This may be for Michael. I know we're talking about property frontages, meeting the 20 feet was, and I'm going back to their design, but with this, if I understood it right, some of these lots have more of they're fronting onto a courtyard. The front of the house would be the courtyard, and the rear of the house would be the alley we're creating. Does it matter about the front and rear of the house as far as it gets property
No,
frontage?
we're talking about lot frontage.
a lot with.
Before we ever envision a building on a piece of property, it's how the lot is laid out. So this is a subdivision consideration. So at the time of subdivision, it's just a square of land. It would meet its lot frontage, which I know is a little maybe misnomerish because you think front is front and the opposite of front is rear, and you expect that to be like the front of the house. But it's
Any
where-
boundary, any
fronts-
border of the property, 20 feet has to be on the public.
On something, right now, it's only public right-of-ways. This gives an option for another option, private access easements. Then when they come to put buildings on it, they can determine which side of the building has a garage. That's probably the vehicular end, and which has a front door, and that's the pedestrian end. and they can make that choice to put the pedestrian end onto a common space like the courtyard they showed, and the other side of the building would go onto the vehicular use area. But right now, the question is, how can a townhome lot gain its frontage? Does it have to be on a public street, which at the bare minimum is a 50-foot right-of-way, some are larger, or can it be off of something called a private access easement?
All right, thank you.
Y'all been involved with anybody else in the few counties around in our area that have done this? Is there anybody else doing this concept in another town or another jurisdiction?
Not that I know of.
Mike, I thought I saw somewhere in the amendment or the language of the introduction of it that you said a neighboring town has a private access easement in the code and we don't, and we had it in the LDO, or the UDO, and we don't in the LDO?
Sure. There's two subdivisions sitting right behind this building.
Right.
Townhome development, private access easements. There's one going on off Jones Dairy Road, private access easements. They're all developed under the UDO. So this is not a foreign concept to the town. They exist on paper and on pavement, right behind us here. So it's a concept. I don't believe any of them are going to the design level that you'll see in the rezoning case next.
Right.
With this developer, to use these shorter areas for the 4-unit buildings as they described. But the general concept of using private access easements in lieu of public streets, public right-of-ways, has been exercised already in town. Plus, a lot of the other communities around the area do have such provisions. Now, a lot of the other communities also have planned unit development or PUD type zoning where you can really customize zoning and see a project, and I approve that exactly as you show me on the screen, and then they go and build that. So the town LDO does not have that option. The LDO has to be built with an option for them to exercise at the next step of subdivision, as opposed to a one-off. Yeah, I like what you're showing me here, but it's using a private access easement. You approve the zoning to use private access easements in lieu of streets. So that is the difference with a lot of the communities around us also.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions for the applicants or town staff?
No, I don't.
All right, thank y'all. With that, is there any further discussion by the board? If not, we'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny, or any approval with recommendations.
I'd really like to see staff come back with an understanding, to us at least, around, are there any length limiters or other pieces? I understand that we can look at before it goes in on the text amendment. Could I create a 2-mile easement?
All right, so would that be more of a motion to table with modifications?
Yeah, I would make a motion to table this until those modifications are brought forward.
All right,
I'll second that. Oh,
I think
go
we
ahead.
have some from town.
Go ahead.
I would just say, I mean, you can also make the recommendation with the change,
And then send that to the,
correct,
for debate.
not to change your motion, but
No, I get it, and part of me is I would let the commissioners end up dropping the final say on it. But if, I'd love to have that discussion to get the feedback from them as well on the length. Is it really a concern or not? And so I would say approve with the additional text with that.
All right, do you want to specify a
Yeah,
maximum
I was
length?
just working my out in my brain for a second.
150 feet.
I gotta find where it says the.
Would it not be 512B
Yeah, I was gonna just.
as
the
another
number's so
D?
listed.
Yeah, as another, as another, like, there's another letter there, like A, B, C.
So here would be the amendment, and correct me if it doesn't make any sense. I'd make a motion to recommend TA-23-05, the applicant initiated text amendment to the LDA sections so listed in the minute or in the
Agenda.
agenda, with the additional recommendation of a limiter on the length of a private easement, recommended or suggested of 150 feet or less, and to the town board of commissioners.
All right. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Duly noted. Motion carries 3-1. All right. Next item on the agenda is rezoning case RAZ 23-03 Hills at Harris Creek rezoning map amendment.
Thank you. Yes, rezoning 2303 is a project known as Hills at Harris Creek. The overview here is this is about a 116-acre property made up of 4 separate tracts, all located on the north side of Mitchell Mills Road. Current zoning is Wake County R30, so this property does lie outside the town limits at the moment. The property contains about 1,600 feet of frontage on Mitchell Mill Road, and the major unique thing to this property is it has a 180-foot wide Duke power line easement running parallel all the way up it. So it occupies about 20 acres of the 116-acre compilation of property, so very unique. The future land use of this property in the entire region, north of Mitchell Mill and west of Rolesville Road, between Rolesville Road and Jonesville Road, is medium-density residential. The proposed zoning here is a split zone, so 2 zoning districts. The majority of the land, just over 100 acres, for the residential high zoning district as a conditional district, and then the remainder, about 13 acres, for the neighborhood center, also as conditional zoning district. So with the conditional zoning comes a set of conditions of approval, and this project is bringing forth a concept or a sketch plan also, showing a form of development. And just as a note there, again, because this property is not within the town limits, in order to execute such a development, it would need to be voluntarily annexed into the town, and that annexation 2204 case is riding parallel with this when it gets to the town board. On the right-hand side here is a clip from the exhibit that the developer has proposed, and it's in your packet here. First, about the residential high zoning district. Again, this is about 103 acres. I'm just going to get my cursor. So this area here generally is the RH zoning district, so the majority of the land, about like that. This is proposed to contain all of the single-family detached units. And in the conditions, it has a condition says 270 maximum dwelling units could be developed, of which a maximum of 115 would be townhomes. So that leaves, if you minus out the 150 townhomes, that's 155 single-family detached. So that's the math currently by the condition being provided. So again, this entire area here is single-family detached units. Below or south of what this is a collector level road. This portion here, still in the RH zoning district, is single-family attached townhomes. And in the RH district, there is a standard that says no more than 15 gross acres can be developed as either single-family attached or multifamily, 2 uses that are permitted in that. So the developer understands and knows that come subdivision time, they will have to prove and show that this area here, roughly, is in the RH district is less than 15 acres, because they can only develop up to 15 gross acres for the townhome use. Moving to the neighborhood center zoning district, again, geographically, it lies right around like this area here. It is approximately 13 acres, and the residential type is solely townhomes that they're proposing. And then there is a approximately 2-acre non-residential site right here. As you'll see in your packet, in the TIA, for traffic generation purposes, the applicant did state that that would be a daycare center as a zoning use. So that is how the inputs for the TIA were done to take an actual use. And daycare center has some pretty more intense morning and afternoon pickup time type uses or trip generation. So that was key to understanding the impacts for the traffic study related to this. So overall, looking at 270 units over 116 approximate acres, that's an overall density of about 2.3 dwelling units per acre. This exhibit is calling out many of the site amenities and open spaces and things of that nature that the applicant has already identified. So this community would have a clubhouse and pool, multiple park sites, activity areas. They're meeting a greenway requirement, bringing a greenway through the site such as that on the north end. TIA road improvements to Mitchell Mill and full frontage improvements across that 1,600 feet of frontage are required. And again, all the conditions being brought forth are voluntary per the LDO and general statutes. Real quick rundown through the conditions: compliance to the concept plan, the maximum of the 270 dwelling units, and affordable housing contribution. I think it triggers at a certain building permit stage. Development of a pollinator garden. And right now, that is written as being identified to be in the Duke Power easement location as a location. Timing per residential building permits for delivery of those handful of recreational amenities that would follow the phasing plan, kind of obviously as the developer builds out. Commitment to townhomes of 1,500 square foot and maximums of 3 stories. For the single family detached, 2,000 square foot minimum for every building. A building foundation of 18-inch commitment. And then transportation improvements, kind of doubling down on what the TIA calls for recommendations. And then the exclusion of multifamily use in the NC. So should that 2 acres that I mentioned not go as a daycare center, they have withdrawn the opportunity to do multifamily there as a use. Looking at the analysis, the community transportation plan. So here's the site, crudely drawn in red. The CTP had a collector road traveling somewhere in this vicinity. With other developments, specifically the rezoning that this board saw, I think last winter, called 5109 Mitchell Mill, their collector road runs east-west, much farther south through here. What this developer has done, as you see on your concept plan, is locate an east-west collector in about the same location for that future connection to the tone that's been set to the west. So this road is not going to be developed here on the north end. It would be kept farther south, and due to a number of environmental constraints and other property issues, et cetera, this seems to be a more practical location. So that is the only, that plus the ultimate improvement of Mitchell Mill Road, this green, which is a 4-lane divided median curb gutter bike lane sidewalk type roadway, 110-foot right-of-way. The Greenway plan called for a greenway generally in the Harris Creek vicinity here, and the applicant has brought it through their property roughly where my cursor is at this moment. They are committing to side path along the improvements of Mitchell Mill that are called for, and bicycle lanes are still a topic to be discussed with the DOT and will be fleshed out at construction plan should the zoning be approved. The traffic impact analysis, for which we do have a representative from the consulting firm RKA, fleshed out as this: cumulative daily trips would be just under 3,000. And because of that, in the development commercial use, that daycare center, there was some trip reduction here, and you see the bigger impact. Yeah, and I guess was equally in the morning and the afternoon. So there's a -60 deduction from those peak times due to some internal caption. So the idea is folks within this neighborhood would be using that daycare center as well, either on their way to work, from work, et cetera, coming or going from the neighborhood. For the consistency statement, staff analysis resulted that the committed use and the maximum density restrictions, again, that 2.3 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed RH and NC district, they all fulfill and are consistent with the medium density residential future land use plan. Again, that density is actually less than the prescribed 3 to 5 units per acre, so it's actually low on the density relative to what medium density land use is designed for. The 2021 CTP roadway network recommendations are being demonstrated to be fulfilled here, and same as are the Greenway plan, with routing that Greenway through the northern end of this property. Through the TRC review summary of this, no further comments on this are resulting. It is worth noting that this application began about a year and a half ago. It was under a different case number. It went through 3 reviews, then the applicant changed the zoning districts, and that triggered the application to kind of start new with this REZ 2303. So if you looked on the town web pages for the project, you'll notice some older records from all through 2022 as well. So this application with these developers has gone on for quite some time. Staff is recommending that the board offer their approval to the town board based on the future land use category compliances, the proposed density, the mix of land uses, which includes 2 types of residential, and then albeit small, commercial component. And then also considering some of the unique development and limitations of the property. Earlier, I mentioned the Duke power line easement. In your packet, there's a letter from Duke as the applicant tried to get permission to put a greenway running north-south along that length. I forget how many feet that would have been, 3,000 feet or so. Duke declined that option. So that was part of the staff review. Ideally, that would have been a great place to put a greenway, but that was denied by Duke. So alternatives were come up with the applicant to come up with some other pedestrian connectivity. So beyond the town greenway that runs across the northern portion, there's a number of other private trails that go through this community, and then, of course, sidewalk network to get connectivity between the multiple areas of this. So that's just one of the many unique development limitations of the property. If you've looked at the surrounding areas in the future land use map or the zoning map, et cetera, you'll see there's a few large lot residential county developments to the east and the west. This property really doesn't have an opportunity to grow. The hope is that some of these road connections will be made in the future. I think there's 6 stubs to the east or west through the concept plan. But for most part, this property is surrounded by county properties that are unlikely to change in the near term. So it's a bit of a unique property in that regard. It borders the Harris Creek on the north, Mitchell Mill on the south, and then bounded by 2 large, older county, I'll call them subdivisions at this time. So again, some unique aspects. It's a long and skinny property. The motion we have on the screen here is for the board to either recommend approval or denial of this rezoning to the town board. And the applicant, again, has a presentation if you'd like to hear that, or just start with some questions and answers.
All right, thank you. We can hear from the applicant, and then,
One question before we start.
Okay.
Yeah, because I just read the Duke Energy piece, and there was the section that will be a pollinator area for open space, but knowing Duke and how they work on those lines, they could be,
I'll let the applicant, they had the conversations with
Vote
them.
every year.
every couple of years, they come through with basically weed killer and just destroy everything, because they're
If they
more
have
interested in making
access.
sure their equipment.
Scorched earth.
Stays.
That is correct, Commissioner Schwartz. We spoke to Duke, and basically they said we can plant it, but they have the right to mow it if they need to, and they generally try to work around those, and they've got some area there. We've got a great relationship with Bruce at Duke, but we understand that is at our expense, and that will be, the intent is to maintain that. It's pretty, once their wildflowers are planted, it's pretty kind of self-sustaining, but it's our expectation that the HOA would work with Duke, to replant, I guess, or try to maintain that.
Another question would be that considered at that point, because it's open space, is it just wild open space versus?
Yeah, it's unimproved open space. I mean, we can't, they're
do anything.
very limited what Duke will let us do. This is kind of a low impact.
During your calculations, you calculated it as unimproved versus improved space?
We can't touch it. So no trees, crossings have to be at a minimum. Nothing can be parallel with the lines. So actually, the wildflower became a,
Yeah.
And it also only grows but so
the best-
high,
the
which is
better
what
fit,
Duke is
yeah, and they-
concerned about. So
yeah.
it's kind of a way to use that area to the extent we can to make it, more attractive for the community, and also, just
Just besides leaving it rocks.
But they will come and put it, chemically treat it, because you can't maintain a wildflower garden in North Carolina, because you're going to have gum trees, you're going to have pine trees, you're going to have briars come up through there. So it's just not going to be a sustainable piece. It won't get just mowed, it will get sprayed on there.
I'm not here to speak for Duke, but I know because it's a pollinator garden that they actually do not, what we were told is that they don't spray that area, that they would mow it if they had to, but frankly, what Bruce said is what likely happens is big trucks will just drive through it and kind of crush it down. But that's something that the HOA would need to manage. So we'll maintain it the best we can, as long as we can, but know that ultimately we answer to Duke in that area. And
Did you have a formal presentation, or do you just want to
we've
ask
got a
questions?
presentation. If anybody has any questions, we're here to answer any questions. We can pull up the site plan.
I think if you go ahead with your site plan, that'd be good. That might spur some questions.
You know, and looking at the site, the biggest, the two things we also want to talk about just quickly. When we looked at this bikeway, as we talked about before, it actually goes right through a wetlands as well. So that was one of the reasons why we moved it, as well as connecting through. One of the things that we also took when we talked to the Greenway Commission and the Greenway staff, the Greenway would come in, avoid most of the wetlands, and then kind of cut through and come around. You know, even though this site's 100 and something acres, 10 of it belongs to Duke Energy and their power line. Another 6.5 or so are untouchable wetlands. So we've got a significant number of restraints here that we're trying to squeeze development in, as well as meet the criteria for the Greenway to have it fit so it actually, you can enjoy the wetlands and not see it destroyed. So the wetlands makes this rather unique path connecting from the north to the south or east to the west around the wetlands. Finger which comes there, and we'd have one slight crossing for it. And then the other large wetlands area is actually in the front, which kind of helps separate out. This wetlands area here separates kind of the townhouse area from the street area itself. So looking to find that balance of enough units to make it developable, as well as given the constraints there on the site.
Yeah, I know the topography, I know this property pretty well, so I know it's a challenge to begin with, so I do appreciate the fact that somebody's looking at it to begin with, so don't take anything I'm saying in a lighthearted way in that respect. I mean, I definitely understand the topography and the challenges that are faced with it for sure. I have, a couple questions or concerns, though. I mean, I appreciate what you're doing with the greenway there at the north end of the lot, or the property. That doesn't make it very convenient for the rest of the property, of course. I mean, I know you'll say that you've got sidewalks and all that kind of stuff to get there, but without anything connecting to it other than streets and sidewalks, it's not ideal, is what I'll say. I'm not going to necessarily say there's room to do something different, but I just know that being someone who spent 6 years on that board, and as hard as I worked to get a lot of that stuff in place, this is one of the biggest things that we have issues with, is connectivity. And I know you're connecting the property at the northern part, but when you have all the townhomes on the southern part, and you've got that wetlands that's going up over into another property that's been mentioned is also being developed, trying to get those to connect is incredibly vital. And without anything going along I know it's oriented differently here, but that's the southern end of the property, without anything coming out of those townhomes where you have your most dense populated area, with no greenway coming out of there along, at least from what I can see, coming out of that area and along that greenland, wetlands, and stubbing out to the west to hopefully connect to that other property that Mike mentioned earlier. That's where, that connectivity issue becomes vital, because right now, in a straight line from the main entrance of this property to downtown, or not even to downtown Rolesville, just straight up to Main Street is 3 miles. That's in a straight line. So that's a 2-hour round trip walking at 3 miles an hour. So there's nothing walkable about anything here right now, right? So having the connectivity just to be able to get there is important. And if you've got to walk all the way through the neighborhood just to get to the northern end, as opposed to being able to connect into one of the other paths that will then be a little bit more straightforward.
Let me interrupt you there
You
for
know.
a second. This is the Greenway, just the Greenway plan. There's also a bike plan as well. That's the next slide. So this is the 2 bikeways. And so we've got the bikeway, 10-foot path along Mitchell Mill, and then this other bikeway and wider street here that connects through. So we've got as much connectivity as possible on that, and knowing that these bikeways and sidewalks would give people some advantages to connecting through. But I do understand the issue of going the length of the site. And one of the issues we had with Duke is not being able to use anything
Right.
even adjacent to that. So we
Right.
can't parallel it even
Right.
due to safety of the power grid.
I also know that, or I would imagine, based on last several meetings from town commissioners, will not be very interested in seeing townhomes this far away, especially with an increased density, even though medium density, and even though I know the acres and all that is going to high density, and I know the numbers look right on paper, look comparable, but the fact that it's going high density, and then town center, again, 3 to 5 miles away from anything that's even remotely related to the downtown area, right now, I feel is a little bit premature for this kind of density in this kind of rural area, especially when there's not a townhome within a 3-mile radius of this particular project. And I just know you're going to have an uphill battle going against the commissioners with this particular density this far out. And I'm frankly not that comfortable with it either. And even though I understand and appreciate how you're squeezing in there, especially with the text amendment allowing you to get that many more townhomes by pushing them 90 degrees and giving you that more space to work with, I just think it's too far away to be an effective use of that type of zoning right now. I mean,
Yeah,
it could change in 5 or 10 years. I mean, we don't know. Maybe it would work in 10 years. But right now, I think townhomes that far away, not even close to being walkable, even if we had every inch of greenway in place, it's very far away.
And I think by the time we're built out, I know the Hopper project that Mike alluded to,
Yeah.
Mr. Underhill's, he owns the sort of the intermittent piece between us and the Hopper project. But the Hopper project, and I apologize, I don't know the name of the other project that's right around the corner. Those are much farther ahead of us in the process. By the time that we are built out, there'll be several townhomes within this area.
Right. Well, and that's, yeah. And again, historically though, that's kind of been what's the issue is a lot of that stuff has been coming through, and then commissioners just don't seem to be either catching on to that, because every single meeting they talk about townhomes too far away from downtown. So I'm just letting you know that's what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome of here, I'm just letting you know that they've been really, really reluctant for that. And I haven't been in favor of those particular townhome properties either that you bring up. Because again, right now where we are, at least from my perspective in the town, those are too far away. Even down Jonesville Road, and that I won't even get on that because that's a whole nother topic for me, but all of those things I think are too far away. They're on the other side of the bypass. They're not walkable to downtown. We don't even have a greenway to get there. There's nothing connecting them. And for that kind of a dense population to be so disconnected from the town, I just don't think that's what fits right now at this moment in time.
Thank you for your opinion. Thank
Yep.
you. And we actually did respond to the Hopper plan that was approved with its townhomes, which actually they were given more townhomes than what we're proposing.
Yeah, and I think they have a bigger commercial lot as well, and that was the proponent that I think, that was one of the only reasons why I think I recall some of the commissioners being okay with it. And they were really a stippler on what was going to go in there and when was that commercial property going to be developed and available, which is going to be the same question with this one right here, and you keep bringing, or I won't say you, but in presentations, the idea of a daycare keeps coming up. I don't know if that's an example or if it's a commitment, but if you have a commitment, that's going to be very favorable moving forward, but that's a much smaller commercial lot than what that other property was dealing with, and I think that's what favored them a lot more with that kind of a density, is having that kind of larger commercial property, and it was also on the corner of a fairly high-traffic intersection where this is not. So I think
Yeah,
those
so I think
different.
That's kind of the driving factor. The daycare center concept, we don't have anything under contract, but we are in discussions, I'll say, and we're progressing with designs for that function. That's really a function of, like you said, this is it's not the prime commercial
Right.
intersection that the Hopper project has. It's close to it, but the daycare center, what we wanted was a lower impact commercial use, and we've had several neighborhood meetings. Obviously, Mike alluded to, this is not a new project, and
Right.
and we've been going back and forth quite a bit, over the last, certainly even before I joined Ellis, but the daycare center is kind of a compromise with some of the neighbors in terms of a lower impact. It's not, there's no nights, there's no weekends, from a traffic standpoint. So we think that that's a complementary, we want that commercial piece to be viewed as kind of an unofficial amenity of the
Right.
development. And really, the prime benefit goes to the folks that are going to be living here. So that's kind of a local neighborhood use. It's low impact, in terms of, it's more palatable, I guess, for the neighbors than more of the intense commercial up at the Hopper site. But in talking to the folks at Hopper, I mean, they are, and what we're telling the commissioners, they need the rooftops to be able to make that commercial viable.
Right.
So it's kind of a chicken or the egg, debate when talking to the commissioners in terms of, we know that they need the commercial and we want the commercial, but you do need the rooftops to support that, particularly, as you said, if this portion of town is kind of growing together, developing, even though they're individual projects, it's kind of a, some regional look to the area.
The quick question, the Hopper project's on the Mitchell Mill, right?
Yes.
And so, but if you go to the other end of this property and this map down, that's your almost abutting Callis Falls. There should be just one strip of properties, Manley Farm, I think it is, and then you're in Callis, which is a whole bunch of townhomes and homes and other pieces in that space. The Greenway would have to go through some existing properties. Do you have an agreement with those people for the Greenway to connect? Because at this point, you could end up having Callis Falls potentially walkable into this area and back and
Right.
forth. You've connected, well, not to downtown, you've connected a larger group of folks to a Greenway.
It wouldn't be in the scope of their project, though. That's the problem.
Yeah, so
One of those things that
I'll
they
say
have
that-
a
I know.
discussion, hey, I'm
Mr.
connecting
Schwartz,
two
yeah.
communities.
I know.
All right, we're-
That was one of the bigger challenges we had sitting on that board in that committee, is when you get outside the ETJ where nothing's been planned, then the only way you can make the north end of where they had this drawing connect is to go through private property.
And you're real close, right? 'Cause
You're close, yeah.
There's just probably an acre property or 2
Right.
acres of property right there.
Right.
But that connects the two, because honestly, anything on this side of or that side of the bypass, good luck when you finally trying to make that connection over the bypass, because.
Well, you got 4 tunnels. Well, you got the 4 tunnels.
And I do think that the
Retired before those
Greenway,
things show up. So
Probably.
again, the connectivity question is you need to build those things before anybody's making commitments to make those other connections. But if I can at least connect some of these communities on the other side of the ETJ,
Yeah.
better palatable to me, right?
Right, and connecting to the east is more ideal because that second tunnel is going to be operational with the point development when that's done. So coming through Callis Falls into the point and then underneath that second bypass will be one way to get you into downtown. But like you said, you got to go through at least 2 or 3 properties before you get there, so.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're doing as best we can with our site to give as many connections as possible.
I think you have availability there, both of us agree with it. It would be nice if there was some discussion with the property owner about seeing if you can make that.
Yeah, we'll certainly, I mean, at this point, it's conceptual. Once the location or the general location is approved, we'll certainly have those discussions. I will say, I think until those people are ready to, because those are just private residences now. In my discussions with them over the last several months, I would be surprised if they were interested in having a greenway go through right now, but we certainly will have, once I know where it's going to be, I can certainly have those discussions.
My just history would say when Callis Falls is built out and this is built out and they're in between the two and people want to walk it, they're going to do it. So they're
Yeah,
much better off
and
having
I would
something
say,
built
you know,
sooner.
I would suspect if some other developer comes to you before one of those two pieces, that a condition of connectivity is a virtual certainty, I would presume. So.
I would think with the stub roads that this neighborhood will provide, those larger lot neighborhoods now have become developable. So people may be ready to cash out and
And even
sale.
if it's not a cash out, if I'm the person, and this is probably the discussion you have, is it's coming, better to have it built by us to your spec. quote
Sure,
unquote,
and I think too,
privacy fences,
that might
whatever,
be,
or they're just gonna walk through your property, which I've seen.
yeah, and I will say, once we are built out, or at least once we're approved and it will know where it'd be, I think a potential condemnation discussion with either the town or the county becomes much more, feasible and practical. So I think the Greenway will connect eventually. It's just a matter of how
In this
and
case,
when.
somebody has to be first, and this one's first.
All right. Any other questions for the applicants?
Nope.
I didn't ask. Did anybody sign up to speak from the public tonight? All right. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Allenbarger? Nope.
No.
Any discussion from the board? All right.
Good.
We can entertain a motion if the board's ready.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and make a motion. Like to make a motion to recommend to the Town Board of Commissioners to approve rezoning of REZ-23-04 Hills at Harris Creek.
That's 03.
REZ,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think you
20,
said.
it does say 04 here, I'm sorry, 03, I'm sorry.
Okay.
REZ-23-03. Okay.
All right.
Just the rezoning, this is not the concept plan, this is just rezoning, correct?
Correct.
This is rezoning subject to the conditions and the concept plan.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Lawrence. Is there a second? Second. Have a second, Mr. Schwartz. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Make it noted that motion is carried 3-1. All right, on to agenda item number 3. The TA 22-01 LDO sections 5.1.2J and 3.1.3B, the applicant initiated text amendment.
Good evening, Chairman Moss and Planning Board members. For your consideration is text amendment 2201, and this has to do with a residential care facility definition and building height. And like the last two cases we just saw, this case is a companion to the rezoning that will follow this on the agenda. So in the LDO, residential care includes assisted living facility, independent living facility, and continuing care facility. And the proposed text amendment clarifies some items under residential care, or I'm sorry, convalescent care. I always call it continuing care. So for convalescent care, this is a new information that the residential facilities that provide care and non-permanent housing for individuals recovering from an illness. This category describes a building or buildings, a section, a distinct part of the building, whether operated for profit or not, which undertakes through its ownership or management to provide housing, meals, and one or more personal services for a period of 24 hours to one or more adults who are not relatives of the owner or administrator, so that is new. And then with independent living facilities, adding more definition here. Again, this is in line with industry standards. So with independent living, it's one or more buildings with age-restricted multifamily dwellings where at least one occupant is 55 years or older. And these facilities shall feature controlled access to a principal building. And this is different than the assisted living or the convalescent care facility. And this simple clarification is helpful. The applicant proposes to add per acre to this item. Right now, if you read, for example, if 10 units per acre are allowed, the residential care facility can have 20 rooming units. So without having that per acre, it could be interpreted a different way. So this just clarifies that when you have this type of use, you can double the density that's allowed in the base zoning district. And for building height, the applicant proposes to add a maximum height of 60 feet with the installation of sprinklers and approval of a conditional zoning district. And this is something that we see in another section of the LDO. The town center mixed-use district does have the option to go 60 feet in height if approved with the concept plan and the sprinklers. So staff does recommend approval of this text amendment 2201 with amendments to clarify residential care facility uses and building height in the residential high zoning district, specific only to the residential care facilities. Now, the applicant is available for presentation and questions, and of course, staff is available for your questions as well.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Gruber before we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, I forgot to note this. I checked and I can't remember at home, but can you pull up the GIS on this property and see how many feet away from Main Street it is?
What we're looking at right now is just the text amendment. Be happy to pull up additional information or the GIS when we get to the rezoning. If,
Okay, that's
seems
fair.
like that would make
That's
more
fair.
sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
zoning is right. Yeah, sorry.
All right.
The height restriction doesn't bother, that's still below.
That's 2 stories, right?
We're 100 foot, so yeah, that's fine.
60 feet is 2 stories?
60 feet would be,
3?
and maybe the applicant can address that in their
3? Okay.
4 stories. All right, if the applicants would like to make their presentation. If you would, please state your name
12 to 15
as well.
Okay. I'm sure it's here.
My name is just a moment. Oh, yeah.
Oh, 60.
It's on the desktop. I'm looking. Got my eyes on
In
it.
the commercial, you gotta have space for all your HVAC.
On the right?
plumbing
Oh,
and stuff.
Okay, this one probably.
Right,
That's it. Awesome.
Usually on the house, it's like 12
Okay.
There you go.
per story, so like a 35.
Good evening, Chair Moss and members of the board. I'm Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the developer of this project, and it's Arden Active Adult Living, and also with me is Jim Lindsay with Arden. And so we're excited tonight to present to you an active adult living facility that will add a new housing type to Rolesville and help keep some of our aging population in the community. And so I'll let Jim give an overview of kind of what Arden's mission is, because it does inform the text change and why we're asking for these definitional changes. So,
Thanks, Matt. Oh, yeah, good evening. Like Matt said, I'm Jim Lindsay. I'm with Arden Active Living. We are providing what we think is an innovative new way of providing senior housing. We've developed senior housing in the past, and there's really, when you think about senior housing, there's a continuum of care. And traditionally, it starts with independent living. It moves to assisted living, which is like assistance with daily needs, onto memory care, and then onto skilled nursing. And so there's sort of a continuum you follow as you age or as your health acuities increase. And what's missing in that is sort of an earlier stage entrance into the continuum of care. And we're defining that as active living. And what it is it's strictly defined as being 55 plus, but our residents are typically about in early 70s, and they're needing more controlled access. There's a desire to be around their peer group. If they were to move into a multifamily building, Typically, they might be friends with their neighbors, wave at their neighbors, but they're not going to have that community aspect of being around their peer group to then engage in the programming that we offer and really that socialization that a lot of folks don't have when they're living by themselves. So we sort of this is a burgeoning new idea that we didn't invent, but I think we're kind of at the forefront of it. And the way we came about it was we had independent living facilities that includes all the meals and kind of a concierge type services. But the issue with that is it really keeps the price point really, really high because you can't opt out of those additional services. So folks are coming to us saying, I want to be in your buildings. I want the socialization. I want the community. But what we don't have, but do I have to pay for the food? Do I have to pay for that extra concierge help because the price point's just really, really high? In a place like Rolesville, it'd probably be close to like about $4,000, high, maybe $3,800 a month for all those, for the housing, but also all the services that come with it. And so what we're trying to do is start and allow people that don't need all that help, or certainly not the food and the concierge services, because they're a healthier demographic or a healthier point in their life, and allow them to enter our facilities and really then opt into those options if they want, and to keep the barrier to entry lower. And so that kind of bleeds in or leads into what Matt is going to discuss in terms of the text amendment. Is what we're trying to do is expand that continuum of care, and to do that, there needs to be a new definition in the LDO.
Right. So when we first started looking at this site and what sort of entitlements we needed, we pulled up the Rolesville LDO, and what we found was that the definition of residential care was the only senior housing definition in the LDO. And it's not uncommon. I think Jim and Arden have found that in other jurisdictions, in other places in North Carolina. And so the residential care definition that exists in the LDO defines basically all senior living in the LDO as assisted living. And so it contemplates 24-hour medical care. And so that's not really what we're proposing here. But we're also not proposing just a regular unrestricted market rate apartment building. And so what we wanted to do is be very narrow with it and as specific as we could to define our use as independent living facilities. And so when we opened up the LDO to do that, that we found that it mentioned these other categories of senior housing, but it didn't define them. And so we worked with Mike and Meredith to add these definitions. And so this didn't come from a place of looking at the LDO and saying, we can't develop under this because we can't meet the setbacks or the right-of-way widths or things like that. It came from, we want to add this additional use to kind of update the use definitions with the times. And so that's what we've done here, and we've defined independent living facilities along with convalescent care, which is more short-term health rehabilitation care, and then also the assisted living facilities definition, which is what you would think of as a typical nursing home with 24-hour medical care, folks kind of later in the stage of the continuum of care that Jim mentioned. And so the other aspects of the text change, Meredith did a good job explaining, but the main, it's really two-pronged. It's defining our use, and then it's this height addition here. And the reason that we need additional height, it we'll get to in a moment, is that this type of senior housing use that Arden is focusing on is really aiming at kind of middle market seniors. And so there are a lot of groups, there's a lot of affordable government subsidized senior housing on the low end, and then there are a lot of luxury communities on the other end. And so what Arden has found is that there's not a lot in the middle. And so, a lot of people who've had good incomes, good careers, maybe they were a police officer or nurse and they're retired now, they can't afford the luxury communities, but they also don't qualify for the government subsidized, AMI limited senior housing. And so the goal with the height is that, to kind of serve that middle market, Arden is looking to have a certain amount of efficiency in their kind of building design, their programming. And so they found that 4 stories is really the ideal height for this type of use to reach kind of an efficiency. Because if you chop off a story, for example, and go down to 3 stories, then you have a lot of the same operating cost and same requirements for the building that you would with a 4-story design. And so that's the justification. And, you know, we'll obviously get more into the specific project design in a moment when we get to the rezoning item. But just in terms of the height, we're also, you know, not, I think we're back up to 1 residential lot. And then otherwise our frontage is, you know, all adjacent to the middle school and then to the road. So the height there should be a nice transition. And we've also tried to account in this language for cases that come after us. So the way it's worded is intentional, that all cases that request more than 35 feet in height, to get the 60 feet, you have to go through the conditional zoning process. So it allows you all and the Board of Commissioners to still have control over areas where they're allowing more height. So, you know, we think it's well thought out. We've tried to make it very narrow to, you know, get in front of kind of unforeseen consequences. And so we respectfully ask for your approval and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. Define low end and high end.
You want to speak on that? You've got the numbers.
Yeah, so low end would be, and really, for lack of a better term, like it's an affordable housing, so it's subsidized housing. So when you think about that missing middle, as Matt.
What is that? Dollars?
It's stipulated by code. I think right now it's $1,000 a month or so.
What's
but,
high end?
that would be anywhere, you'd probably be pushing low 3,000, probably right around $3,000 per month. Yeah.
And you said the 60-foot equated to 4 floors?
Correct. Yep.
And this may be a question for Meredith, but for instance, some of the commercial buildings and the school, for instance, what is the maximum height allowed in those zoning districts?
Across the board in our LDO, 35 is our typical building height. We do have some options to go higher in some of our mixed-use districts. And one of the things, I believe it's noted in the staff report, staff does think it's really worth looking at height across all of our zoning districts and uses. That, you know, having this case come in has made us think more about it. You know, like one height really doesn't fit all, and that's basically what we have going on in our ordinance right now.
Did we grant the cobblestone height allowance?
They have town center zoning.
Yeah.
Which allowed them to be a little higher as well?
Yes,
correct?
so that's where you can go to 60 feet in height with the sprinklers.
And that's why I asked the distance, because we just increased the distance to 500 feet. So if this
That was
property,
along the corridor?
yeah, and if this property is close enough to that, then it can kind of still fit within that, even though it's not requesting the town center zoning. So it would still kind of blend with anything else that could come in over there.
Probably just outside, I imagine it.
Yeah, we can take a look.
Yeah, whenever.
Okay.
Mhm.
497.
And has the commissioners approved that corridor height allowance that we voted on previously?
Yes, did I get that correct? Things are running together for me, I'm sorry.
Talking about the 500 feet?
Yeah,
Yes,
they
yeah,
did.
the
Yeah,
fi-
yeah, they did that. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
the 500-foot increase, yes, so the
It
Main
was a
Street
lengthy
corridor, yes.
discussion.
Yeah, so this one really.
That's
There was
right,
a lot of
Derek, you were
confusion.
there.
Oh, yeah, there
Thank
was a
you for
lot of
helping me
confusion.
remember.
Yes.
I was just told our closest property line is at 497, so.
Okay, so there you go. So then,
They're
so
right
then-
on the-
yeah, I figured it would be, so
So this one really isn't too much
it
of a
really, so they
stretch.
could technically go to town zoning.
Yeah, the issue we did look at that. The issue was the commercial requirement.
Yeah. And you've got plenty with Walbrook coming in, which is probably one of the reasons why you guys are interested in that lot anyway, because everything will be within walking distance from your facility, should it be there, with everything coming in with Walbrook.
Exactly.
Because I think that's usually a requirement, or at least something that you find more attractive for your type of
Right.
stuff, right? Yeah. On the assisted living facilities amendment, it mentions the word seniors, but does seniors need to be defined, or is it defined somewhere else? Or, because I know in the assisted or in the independent living, age is mentioned, but I don't know if that's pertinent to the language.
Yeah, I think the 55-year-old age limit there is what controls. I don't think we did define senior. I think it was just, you know,
Yeah.
for each category, we kind of.
It does if you want to restrict from an age perspective, because you want to age restrictions on these. That's the right, but if it's a 55.
This one it says 55.
Only 55 or up.
Right.
And that's the only way.
Right.
One person, right?
Right.
My spouse, I'm 55, sorry, honey, you can't live.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think there's a legal requirement to, hate to discriminate, but to draw that line. You have to
Right.
stay there.
Because,
That's part of the HUD guidelines. And, yeah, I think it's like it's a federal overlay, basically.
so the way this is laid out, then assisted living could be a veterans center as well, or veteran services too, regardless of their age? Or is there still an age associated with this associated living facility?
Right, so the assisted living facility definition, we actually didn't change at all.
Okay.
So that's what's in the LDO now. We've just titled it assisted living, and that was what residential care was defined as.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm kind of asking, though, because the other changes were made, and they do mention age. Should there be any changes to how we're defining assisted living to properly accommodate what you're seeing elsewhere or in the industry, respective to what assisted living facilities qualify as? Because, you know, I know one of the, you know, the town has been trying to attract a lot of the veterans types of programs, and that could very well fall into that facility, and that could be something that may or may not fit into your clientele.
I refer that one over to our legal, because I believe that things like declaration of 55 and older doesn't provide any exceptions to the law.
Okay,
You can say it's older than 55 and see, and then this, but then legally, if I wanted to live there.
You could.
You can't, like, you made an exception for this, you can make an exception for everything. I don't know the law well enough, it's been 10 years since my parents were looking at that. And
Right.
They were bringing up a whole bunch of rules around it, so.
Yep. So as I understand it, I think you're asking if there could, you know, if a veteran center could come in under assisted living facilities. I think, you know, I'd have to talk to Meredith about it, but it would probably be better served under some separate definition and leaving the kind of senior housing framework intact.
okay.
Yeah, and then this is just these definitions are changing, but we're not changing the use table of where they're permitted.
Right, right.
So they're already permitted in residential high density, which is what we're asking for.
Right.
So,
I just saw the word seniors in that first sentence and saw that everything else had some sort of, you know, age mentioned, but seniors was not defined, and I didn't know if that was something that we needed to be worried about.
right. No, it's a good question, and I think we can talk about whether it's helpful to add that word to the B and C definitions.
Okay.
I think.
Was there anything that,
I think we've covered it.
okay,
I mean, we certainly can look to define it more specifically so it's consistent across the board. That's something that we could certainly add to
Okay.
what you're thinking.
okay.
In the convalescent care definition, I'm just, you know, trying to think of the remainder of the town, and where would this apply? Which zoning districts would these apply to? All that allow it, or is it just the residential high only? Because when I read the convalescent care, it talks about, you know, it sounds like it's kind of describing possibly a group home. It talks about a distinct part of a building, a private home, or a home for the aged, or other residential facility. So it sounds like it could be quite a number of things, you know, and just wanted to know where this would allow it to be in as, and what category, what things could fall under that convalescent care, as whether it's, you know, different types of rehab centers or halfway houses or.
Personal residence?
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking about the
Yeah, I
zoning
know, right,
districts.
yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to approve something that may open it up to
Right.
put certain things in neighborhoods.
Suddenly your neighbor has a Alcohol Anonymous meeting?
Yeah, I think there's a separate definition for
Yeah, I was
group
just gonna look
homes.
for uses.
Okay.
But
Does it?
Meredith's checking that.
Yeah,
now.
I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor- well, yeah.
So we already have 4 or 5 of those in town anyway.
What's that? D?
Even house group homes.
Wrong category, I think.
And then that
Go back up to
definition too,
residential.
if I remember correctly, we put that together from looking at, I think, the city of Raleigh definition of convalescent care, and then a couple other examples. So, we didn't just think of it. So, but I see what you're saying, that, maybe that's another area we could add
Yeah.
senior.
Well,
try to
and I
clarify.
think that the section where it talks about private home is kind of where I have more of a heartache, is somebody just,
Right.
most people would be upset if their next door neighbor turned their house into a senior care facility or any other type of rehab facility.
Sure, I just wanted to pull up the use table. So residential care is permitted in residential high, and then it's a special use in office and professional. So it's not something.
Okay, so it's not
that-
across the board zoning?
Right,
Okay.
right.
And there's not much property zone residential high, right?
Very few. Same with office and professionals. Someone would likely need to rezone to get something like that. So
Okay.
there would be some time for you all to take a look in the Town Board of Commissioners.
And you can make that a condition of rezoning to take out certain.
Absolutely.
All right.
And
Yeah.
yes, the alcohol abuse centers and that sort of thing would fall under group homes. You were right, Meredith, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else have any questions for the applicants?
I do not.
All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for Meredith? All right. Any discussion from the board?
I'd like to make a motion to approve TA-2201, applicant initiated text amendment.
I'll
All
second.
right. Have a motion and a second
I'll
for
second,
Mr.
yeah.
Precision. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimous. All right, on to item number 4. MA 22-10, 4724 Burlington Mills Road, Arden at Roseville, rezoning map amendment.
Yes, perfect
Meredith?
introduction, thank you. I don't have to say anything else. So this site is about 11 acres, and it's currently zoned General Commercial Conditional Zoning District, and it has 1,400 feet of frontage on Burlington Mills Road. And right now, you can see the road construction going on with our Main Street project and the Burlington Mills Road realignment. So the future land use designation for this site is commercial. And the applicant proposes to change the zoning from the general commercial to residential high conditional zoning district. And just a note on that, obviously, a commercial land use is a little different than the residential care. But when looking at our comprehensive plan, it does include, in addition to land use, we always seem to focus on the land use piece of a comprehensive plan. But our comprehensive plan also includes some major recommendations, and one I'd like to read. Create a diversity of new houses and ensure high quality and limited locations for multifamily units. So create that diversity of new housing types. So we can keep that in mind as we move forward. So again, this is about 11 acres. The applicant's proposing a maximum of 164 rooming units. And the first condition is general compliance with the concept site plan, that rooming unit max, and also there's a commitment for greenway connections and TIA road improvements. So as per our community transportation plan, Burlington Mills Road is proposed to be a 4-lane road, and there's a lot of activity going on there. So 4-lane divided with curb and gutter, bike lanes, and a sidewalk. Our greenway and plan shows a side path there, so that is an update to our community transportation plan. And the TIA threshold just went to 499 total trips. And if you remember, our threshold for a traffic impact analysis is 50 peak hour trips or 500 daily trips. But the applicant, this is right there at that 500 point, but the applicant thought it was very important to do a traffic study along with this rezoning request. We do have Matt Peach here from Stantec this evening. Matt and his team are the ones who performed the TIA on the town's behalf.
Commend Matt for getting just under the wire on his stuff.
So I mentioned with consistency, our comprehensive plan includes that major recommendation or goal to have a diversity of housing types and focus multifamily in the right location. And this proposal seems to be a good example of that. And the proposed density is reasonable. Burlington Mills Road is consistent with our community transportation plan, and the Greenway is consistent with our Greenway plan. So with the technical review committee, this concept plan went through several rounds of review, and there were no further comments on the proposal. I know the TIA is still draft pending NCDOT and some project decisions with the Main Street and Burlington Mills Road realignment. And I know the applicant's very well versed on that if you want to ask some questions about that. But staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request because of the consistency with the comprehensive plan, and having this different housing type in Rolesville would be something we don't have. So I will let the applicant continue with their presentation. Again, Matt Peach is here if you have TIA questions. Should I go back to your scene? That'd be great. Okay. Let's call that one. Okay. But you probably want to go. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Good evening again, Matthew Carpenter. I think we went through a lot of this in the last hearing, so I'll focus some more on exactly what we're asking for in terms of the rezoning. And so as I mentioned, and Jim mentioned, Arden is a complete active adult living focused brand. So the idea is to target that middle income demographic that they've been focusing on. And as he mentioned, the way they arrived at that was by residents literally asking them if they could pay for less. And kind of, bifurcate some of those services. And so that's what they're developing, and they're trying to, move these projects along, so they can serve that demographic quicker. And this slide just gives you some more information on that kind of missing middle demographic, just in terms of the aging population and then some of the professions that the projects target. So the particular site is at 4724 Burlington Mills Road, and it's outlined in red, and it totals about 10.5 acres. You can see the kind of unusual triangular shaped parcel along the new Burlington Mills Road right away, and that parcel is actually part of the pin outlined in yellow. So that overall parcel got bisected by the Burlington Mills right away, and so as part of our site plan, we'll recombine it into the overall site. And then, obviously, I think you mentioned earlier that the Walbrook project is just to the southeast of the site, and that's obviously a big benefit, and why this site is so attractive is it has good circulation and a lot of opportunity for pedestrian interaction with that shopping center. And then you can see some of the surrounding uses labeled to the left of the screen. You've got the Rolesville Middle School, the Barrington subdivision to the northeast of us, and then Hampton Point to the south. And then obviously the portion of the Burlington Mills Road right away that's shown as wooded there, that's underway now. So that was cleared. Actually, I saw it when I drove by on the way to the meeting. So that project is well underway. And then, as we mentioned before, there are two parts to the project, the text change, which we just discussed, and then the rezoning to residential high density, with the three conditions listed there. So the first is that development will conform with the concept plan that I'll show you in a moment. The second is that only residential care will be permitted. And so the idea there is to restrict it from allowing any, non-age restricted apartments or multifamily. And then finally, the density limit, to really just give you a good idea of exactly what we're asking for. We're not trying to game the density or anything like that. So let's get through those. So this is our overall concept plan, and it's 164 units total. And the majority of those units will be in the large building kind of on the center of your screen, and they'll be in interior corridor apartment style units. with amenities in the building and surrounding the building. So you can see kind of to the left of the building, there are some planned pickleball and tennis courts, a swimming pool. There are event spaces and kind of teaching flexible spaces inside the building too. And then around the outside of the site, we have what are cottage courts. And those are single-story duplex-style buildings. And the purpose of those is to offer an additional housing type here for maybe younger residents who are trying to downsize or they're not quite ready to go to a full apartment-style living scenario. And so those units are incorporated with the overall project, have access to the amenities, all the programming of the main building, and so they're, for all intents and purposes, part of this community. And then just going, through some of the site aspects, when we originally filed this application last fall of 2022, we had our driveway located at the north of the site, and it created kind of a funny, a bad curve as you came around the new right-of-way. And so what we did was explored moving it to line it up with the Burlington Mills Road, the new intersection there, so it'll be a four-way intersection. And that took a lot of coordination. It took us really probably 3 or 4 extra months to work that out, because we had to coordinate with the LAT project and make sure that their timing aligned with when we're trying to start construction. And then the triangular parcel that the driveway's over was actually is owned by another entity, and so we had to get control of that too to make that driveway location work. But we do think it's overall a better design, and it'll be better traffic circulation with that design. And so just a couple of other things to call out. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the Greenway Trail. That location was dictated by staff. That was their recommended location. We did have it on the north side of that BMP, but they wanted it kind of running along the south to connect the pedestrian, the sidewalk that will be along Burlington Mills, and then whatever future development west of the site. And then these pictures are really just meant to give you an idea of what this could look like. So obviously the top left is the outside of the building and some of the amenities. The top right is a rendering of the common area, what that could look like. The bottom left is a unit to give you an idea of what that could look like. And then on the bottom right is the front of the building. You can see the covered access. So controlled access is a big part of the site design. Residents want to know that it's safe and that access is limited. So,
Would controlled access include fencing, like where the middle school is, or any other spaces on here?
so I'd have to look close at the concept plan, but I believe we have to, one of the buffer requirements, at least to the south, is that we have to build a wall south of the BMP. I can't recall whether that's required alongside the shared property line with the school or not. Do you know?
Screening.
RH by
5 foot.
Thought we might have it labeled. It's a 25-foot perimeter buffer type 3.
that has a fence or a wall.
Yeah.
So not a security fence, just a buffer.
Yeah, I mean, and with screen, it would be a privacy buffer, but also, I mean, it would restrict, you couldn't just walk, you'd have to climb over it, so it wouldn't be.
You have to climb over the buffer?
No, there'll be a fence within the
Like a fence.
buffer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there is a fence.
Yeah, I mean, somebody could technically, but it's not going to be,
Not the
you know,
seniors.
yeah. It's not going to be like Fort Knox, but it'll be, the real security is going to come from the fact that to enter the building will be controlled access. You won't be able to
No, I
just
just
walk right in.
thinking that
Pool in the school.
the school and all those kids leaving, that decide not to go home with that, they got to cut through there to get to Burlington Mill to go over to Walbrook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they could take the Greenway. I don't think there'll be a connection in the.
Well, there's a
Ever
current,
kid that cut through somebody's yard?
there is a greenway that leans
I was.
south of the school right there in the lower left-hand corner. There's a greenway that goes from the school into Hampton, into Hampton Point. But yeah, to his point, I'd be a little bit more wary of just people during lunch deciding to take a dip in the pool or something and wanting to make sure that is mitigated properly.
Site security.
Pools have to be fenced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess fence would stop you and I, but. My question really, on the other part of the property you have, you've put a conditional zoning around the assisted living, which would restrict you from doing anything but another or independent living facility on that. If you wanted to change your mind, you'd have to come back and do something else with it. So
That's
even
correct,
if you did this on this side and want to do something else, you'd have to come. But if you decided this facility worked great and you want to build more of it, you're free to do so at that point because you have the zoning. You just have to do the plot improvement.
Correct. I think, so I don't know if I understand your question, but it would be, this would be one phase, so it wouldn't be a phase.
Again, I'm just making sure that we understand this, like, you basically have approval for both lots, even though you're not have any plans on lot 2.
No, it's just,
He broke this one off by itself.
right, so we're not rezoning,
You're not rezoning the other part?
Correct.
no,
Okay.
just the
I
small
thought that was
portion.
the way it read to me was you're zoning both sections.
Right,
Yellow parts are not.
let's see.
Okay.
I think the other one already has a sign up for the title car wash. Isn't that?
That's the Upchurch property on South Main Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the yellow property is part of the Walbrook assemblage, and so, you know, I don't know that there are immediate plans for it, but it's owned by one of those entities, so.
So with a 4-story building, this is just curious, with a 4-story building, that pool's going to be in the shade for half the day.
Old people don't like it too hot.
Just,
Sometimes it's a good thing to own the back.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know if that, it's just an observation.
Be the evening.
Yeah.
No, the evening would be in the sun, because the sun will go that way.
Correct.
It'd be good this month, maybe not earlier in the season.
Rises in the east.
Are there any other locations
Shade the
in this
morning.
area that Arden has a facility?
Not currently in Apex, the first one in the Raleigh area will be breaking ground in, sorry, I just skipped ahead. The first one will be breaking ground in Apex on the other side of the triangle. And that will break ground in November is our plan. So we went through a similar process. I can't remember if it was a text amendment there.
Yeah, we wound up doing a PUD there, but we had to do the same thing and define our use, so.
The way it looks like exactly where my parents live. There's apartment complex for people who want to live in the apartments. They live in the duplex side. They're all part of the same property. So you've got both. If you want to live in the apartment, you can. You want to live in the home, you can. But they have, in your facility, you could choose not to do dining, but if I wanted to pick it up like a meal swipe plan, like in college, because I didn't want to do X, you'll still have a cafeteria, food services, other things, services that people can purchase as they need?
We'll have it so you can contract it out, so people, like, so food will be brought in if you want that, but that won't be required, and there will not be a commercial kitchen.
It's available, right, but not
Right.
mandatory.
So the people in the duplex could buy a meal plan and go into the main building for lunch if they wanted to.
When we serve it, so it won't be served, we won't be having meals there all the time. It'll be
Right, right.
happening like,
Fixed times for
yeah, fixed time,
each of the courses.
But but it won't even be every single day. We'll have it depending on demand. We'll have situations where we'll have lunch that day, or, you know, maybe a couple times a week. Depends on what the
okay.
demand of the
Okay.
facility is.
Okay.
But there will not be a commercial kitchen, so it would be food being brought in from the outside. The majority of our residents cook inside their apartment. They're
Oh, okay.
self-sustaining. Like all the units have full kitchens and are meant to be really even more independent than independent living.
And I'm assuming some of the duplexes, or does the whole thing have guest limitations then because of?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's by code, but also we'll have even more strict requirements on that, because the idea is not to bring it. Really, we want folks that are living in the building to be interacting with other folks in the building and not have, for instance, a grandchild staying over for, you know, they can stay over for a couple nights, but nothing
Right.
long-term, yeah, or even medium-term, really.
Did the school offer any opinion of the site moving next door? And do y'all have any reservations about being next to a middle school?
No, I mean, we don't. We think it's kind of, I mean, it's more so, I think, our main attraction is to be closer to Main Street. I mean, that's really, we're a little bit, I guess, agnostic about being next to the school. If anything, our time, the time when our folks are going to be driving is going to be different than the school. So we won't really be on this, like, I forget the AM, PM, but it was around 30.
It's under 40.
Yeah,
each
31,
peak hour,
32
yeah.
during the AM, PM.
I just think the residents would be, people would want to go volunteer at the school for reading and things,
Yeah.
for work at the other place. I mean, it's a super easy, convenient.
I just kind of worry about the number of phone calls the staff's going to get at, you know, they're being too loud playing soccer tonight and they're
Well, and it's
football
actually,
tonight. And
in terms of just kind of land use planning, we're hoping that it'll be a better transition from Walbrook and Main Street and those commercial uses than the current zoning, which is general commercial. And so right now, it's kind of
agree.
wide open. I mean, you know, we could have a tattoo parlor there. So
Yeah.
I think the idea is to bring something that's enough density to kind of help revitalize Main Street, but is also not, you know, an intense commercial use adjacent to the school, and then some of the other existing neighborhoods to the south and to the north, so.
Yeah, and I just think, I'm thinking back, I live nearby, I live on the other side of the school. And I know when they're having football games and football practice and soccer games, you know, it's not going to be the quiet, peaceful, sitting on your porch evening, unless you like hearing kids hollering until 9:30 at night.
Right, bad band playing.
Yeah. But the middle school band's usually in the afternoons, early
And they're
afternoons.
bad.
The high
But-
school's loud, and I would mile
They
away.
can't hear anyway.
But you get a lot of, you know, I think they turn those fields sideways and they run like 4 soccer games at a time. And, you know, you've got the stadium lights and it's a lot going on in the evenings there. And, you know, I was wondering how your residents will react to that.
I mean, it's sort of, I think, a walkable, that's part of being walkable, more downtown. You have a little more liveliness going on. And so we want to be in a situation where we can be, walkability is huge. So when we can have, our residents are going to want to leave the facility. They want to be able to get out and experience, you know, downtown and be able to not just be in the middle of nowhere. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
So one of the crossings on Burlington Mill, which would be a very busy road, I'm sure has a plan for crosswalk with light.
You mean,
Is the Greenway gonna have a crosswalk with a light?
Well, the Greenway will come down by the new extension, so you won't have to cross Burlington Mills Road to get down to Main Street. You'll be able to stay in,
But Walbrook, you gotta cross, right?
you have to cross Main Street, which will be signaled.
Will be
Yeah,
signaled,
yeah.
and that, I believe that will be that piece of Burlington Mills that's labeled Old Burlington Mills. Actually, maybe to the south, that road will go directly into Walbrook, so,
Old
Right.
Middle's right there, so you could walk along that,
right,
get across the street.
right.
Are there any plans with the school system to make that connection through the school to the existing greenway that leaves the school currently?
I think I'd defer to staff on
That's
that one.
part of
Parks
what's
and
in
Rec
the
staff,
plan,
yeah.
because that will then connect over to Tom's Creek or Pierce
But
Farm.
I'm saying now, the school's not going to build that extra section
No,
of
we would have,
greenway.
the town would have to do it. The town would have to do it. And the town's been talking to the school because the town's also trying to get the wooded lot that the school has that isn't being used. So that's part of what Parks and Rec wants to do.
Okay.
Is get
And I
the easement.
neglected to mention too, that at the north of the site, we're showing a 10-foot side path that was
Yeah.
recommended by the town too.
Yeah.
So that'll help with connectivity.
Speaking of the middle school, is there any concerns with the overflow from sitting in line and waiting for you park? Because middle school gets pretty busy and there's a line going down the road. Some people may want to look at parking in there and waiting and then coming across rather than sitting in the road.
Well,
They have to go all the way down with their new entrance. They have
It's
to,
less
yeah.
attractive
Yeah,
than it would be if it was at the top.
yeah.
Oh, if it was, yeah, but
And that was another reason I was asking about the fence, because I could see mom saying, hey, just cut through back here and we'll be at this corner.
Right. It's a little piece of grass they got to drive over.
well, they could walk 50 feet because they walk out that front entrance, go down the parking lot, and then you're in your parking lot.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm sitting waiting for my kid. And they'll have 50, 60 cars sitting in there waiting for the kids to walk across.
With the shortage of school bus drivers in Wake County, sometimes that school backs up to about the front of that building, the first tall building.
Right.
Some afternoons.
Yeah, and from what I understand, it's not quick if you're sitting in line, but it's a fairly isolated event that's during the
Well, you've got art and security on the job anyway, right? Yeah. He's got his little Segway running around the parking lot, making sure everybody's behaving themselves.
With a helmet on.
Yeah, no, but I think that's important. I mean, we'll want to make sure that, the foot traffic, you can't just use that as a cut through.
Yeah.
And we've done that in our other, found creative ways to make sure that people just know that it's not a cut through or literally put up a fence.
There's a little
That
holly trees
is
with
a-
the spikes.
I see that's a type 3 buffer along the school as well, so that was one I think Meredith said required either a fence or a wall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The type 3? Okay.
And would that be along that whole west property line then?
Right, same buffer for the length of the
Okay.
property line, yeah.
I don't have any other questions.
I don't have any.
I don't have any
Anyone
other
else?
questions.
All right. No other questions? Any discussions? Any more discussions? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead
I'll
and
make a motion to approve MA 22-10.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hill. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Lawrence. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing none, motion carries. Thank
Thank
I'd just like to say thank y'all. I have a father-in-law in a similar place in Clemens, North Carolina, and I asked about the price. Y'all are dead in the middle of what he's paying, and it's very affordable and whatnot, so I think there's a big market for that as the demographics and the baby boomers retire and whatnot, so thank you.
Well, thanks for your support, and we're looking forward to being in the community.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you. All right. On to the
Derek,
communications.
oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Derek, I wanted to make sure we got back to your question. You asked about that distance and the 500 feet. I was thinking that for the Main Street corridor, the properties that can take advantage of that are general commercial properties. So if you're
Right.
zoned general commercial, you can have setback reductions in that. So
Right.
this wouldn't fall into it being a residential high.
No, I know.
Yeah,
The question was more related to how compatible this project would be to that type of zoning if it was there,
Okay.
because it will be very close to it. So in other words, if it was a totally different project,
What
somebody
would
could
happen?
choose that
Sure,
and still build something like this.
okay,
That's what I wanted to, because I didn't
was
want somebody
possible.
coming up to me someday on the street being like, well, why did you let this 4-story building come in? Well, it could have been anybody else if they had chose that particular
Okay.
zoning, is what that was.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're just
Yep,
checking yourself.
appreciate
Okay.
that, thank.
Sure. And
Thank you, guys.
All right. Guess that's you again, Meredith. Planning Director's report.
yes. And let's see, update on previous planning board recommendations, and I may need to get some help or do a quick look online, because I know I've missed a few planning board meetings, so I'm happy to be back this evening. I know we canceled June, so I don't have any update there. And back in May, I don't remember, do you have that in front of you, Michelle? What we did in May? I know, we should know.
That was,
Oh, I can give an update, yes. Thank you very much. So in May, you all heard 1216 Rolesville Road, and that was continued from the July meeting to the August meeting for a few different reasons, but that case is on the agenda for August 1st, so that is a week from tomorrow. And the applicant needs to hold a neighborhood meeting in Rolesville, because their neighborhood meeting was held in Wake Forest. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because I need to check and make sure that the applicant has that in the works. And if the applicant does not, then that case will be continued again. And so stay tuned on that one. So in your packet were the May and June development reports. You know, we have a few highlights here. There were 16 single-family dwelling permits in May and 5 townhome permits, and in June, 7 single-family home permits and no townhome permits. And any questions for staff?
The Pierce Farm, did it get continued again, and when will it be?
That is
con-
on the agenda for a week from tomorrow as well, so August 1st, Pierce Farm.
Okay. Any other questions for Meredith?
Thank you.
Thank you. Town Attorney's report?
I do not have anything to report.
All right, thank you. Is there any other business? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.